Good day, everyone.
Good day, ma'am.
And thank you very much for the privilege, BERC. Thank you so much for the privilege, Dr. Andrew Ilo,
Thank you.
to be part of this great meeting. And I welcome everyone of us to this meeting. And I hope that this meeting will not just be a discussion, but a call to action for each and every one of us. As Andrew has introduced, my name is Ronke Olubamiche. I'm the National Coordinator for the Global Environment Facilities Small Grants Program. It's a UNDP program. The fund is from the GEF, the Global Environment Facility. And so I'm happy to be part of this. Just briefly, it's like the theme for this year's International Day for Biodiversity, which is our solution is in nature, cannot really come at a better time as far as I am concerned, because we can do nothing, we can make no progress, we can achieve no developmental aspiration without nature. And I think everybody will agree with me on this. We've seen proven nature remedies discovered for COVID-19 and other diseases to prove our reliance on nature. And so, I mean, it's just common sense for us to know if we have not been thinking about this before. Unfortunately, I wish those who don't know so much about nature will be part of this meeting, because almost, I'm sure 90% of people on this meeting are lovers of nature and who appreciate what nature is all about. But be that as it may, we will still go ahead, and we hope that whatever we discuss here will get to the right quarters of those who ought to make the right choices. So the reason also, I said that the reason for this current environmental challenge that we all face globally, not only for biodiversity, but for general environmental issues, is because I think before now, people have thought that nature is infinite and that it cannot finish. But of course, we have all been proven wrong. And so it calls for concerted efforts by everyone, from the young to the old, and especially for us to emphasize the role of the youth and doing what is right as far as nature is concerned to meet our development aspirations. Well, I'll give you a brief about the GEF. The GEF is the financial mechanism for environmental projects in the whole world. And if we don't know before, GEF is the largest funder of environmental projects in the whole world. And the GEF Small Grant is targeted mainly towards the community environmental initiatives, but with emphasis on livelihood. And because it is the reason why communities are impacting on the environment and on the livelihood, and on nature, is because they need to survive. And if you are telling them to hold on or to stop their negative impact on the environment, then of course there had to be an alternative that you have to provide for them. So this is the reason why we always, every of our support in community environmental initiatives must, as a matter of compulsion, must contain livelihood enhancement. And on that, globally also, I will mention that GEF has invested over 185 million US dollars in only biodiversity projects to support over 7,800 community biodiversity projects. That is globally. And in Nigeria, of course, we have globally SGPs in over 125 countries, and Nigeria is part of them. Nigeria joined the GEF Small Grants in the last 10 years. And in the last 10 years, we have supported over 50 biodiversity projects in particular. And they all bordered on species preservation, conservation, conservation, habitat conservation, providing alternative livelihood activities for communities who are impacting on the environment or on the species. We have for example, in Cross River State alone, we have over 30 biodiversity projects, although some of them also bordered on climate change projects. And so we have supported quite a number, and this is the reason why we are at the forefront of supporting initiatives that support species conservation and biodiversity preservation. BERC is one of our grantees and has been doing a great work in the area of biodiversity preservation. Even apart from that, we've had the executive director of BERC being a volunteer of some of our projects, even tutoring some other NGOs to be able to apply for and access our funds. And so I was really happy when he informed me about this Zoom meeting, and for us to be able to mark the International Day of Biodiversity. So let me not take too much of your time. I'm sure maybe you will have questions and all that, because I can't give you all the information about the Jeff Small Grant in 5 minutes. So let me stop here, and then maybe later, if we have time.
I want to welcome everyone to today's International Day for Biological Diversity 2020, organized by BERC Nigeria. And our topic for today's discussion is nature's cure for infectious diseases. Next slide, please. If we look at our topic, nature's cure for infectious diseases, we'll see that there are some words we need to understand carefully before we go on. We can see an action word there. No, still go back. You can see an action word, a subject, and an object. Nature is our subject for the avoidance of doubt. Infectious disease is our object, and cure is our action word. Let's go on. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, looking at them, nature is the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth, as opposed to human creation. Nature can range in scale from subatomic level to the cosmic level. Although humans are part of nature, human activity is often understood to be separate from other natural phenomena. Infectious diseases are caused by living organisms such as virus, fungi, parasites, and bacteria. Infectious diseases can be passed from person to person, and we'll discuss this as we go on. Then looking at cure, cure simply means to restore to health or relieve a person or animal of the symptoms of a disease or condition. It could also mean a substance or procedure that ends a medical condition, such as medication, that is drugs, a surgical operation, a change in lifestyle, or even a philosophical mindset that helps end a person's condition. In a 2016 publication in Integrative Medicine, a clinician, Joseph Pizzano, posited that most of the commonly prescribed conventional drugs today treat only symptoms, not the underlying causes of a patient's disease, and thus logically leads to a perception that much of modern medicine is about management of chronic diseases and prevention of more serious sequelae, and not actual cures. Though the use of the term cure has been actively discouraged, except in limited types of cases, perhaps true healthcare reform needs to reclaim this term and concept. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, Infectious diseases, let's take a closer look at infectious diseases now. And the mammalian body is susceptible to infection by many pathogens, which must first make contact with the host and then establish a focus of infection in order to cause an infectious disease. If it succeeds in doing this, it will provoke an immune response that will take effect after several days and will usually clear the infection. But if the infection is not cleared and the microorganism has successfully established a site of infection in the host, then disease can occur. It is necessary to set out first by understanding some terms that are related to infectious diseases before we go on, like transmissible. Transmissible means it is capable of being spread either directly or indirectly. Zoonotic diseases. These are infectious diseases that can be spread from animals or insects to humans, but not from person to person. Contagious diseases. A disease that spread from person to person, from animal to person, or between non-human animals and people by direct contact with the infected individual or their secretions. Communicable diseases are diseases that can be spread from person to person, from animal to animal, between non-human animals and people, or from the environment to non-human animals or people by direct or indirect means. Communicable disease is more commonly used for human diseases than for animal diseases. Non-communicable disease, on the other hand, is a disease condition that cannot be spread from animal or humans to human. An animal or a person who is at the stage of infection in which they are able to spread the infection to others are said to be infective animal or persons. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the nature of infectious diseases are caused by microorganisms, and collectively these microorganisms are known as pathogens. A true pathogen is an infectious agent that can cause disease in virtually any susceptible host. But there are some microorganisms that live on some hosts and do not cause diseases. But when certain conditions are altered, such as the immune system of the host, they can then cause disease. Such pathogens are known as opportunistic pathogens. We said earlier that there's a difference between the term infection and disease. An infection results when a pathogen invades and begins growing within a host. Disease results only if and when as a consequence of the invasion and growth of the pathogen, tissue function is impaired. Some infectious agents are easily transmitted. That is, they are very contagious, but they are not very likely to cause diseases. That is, they are not very virulent. The polio virus, for example, probably infect most people who contact it, but only 5 to 10% of those infected actually develop clinical disease. Other infectious agents are very virulent, but not terribly contagious. The terror surrounding Ebola hemorrhagic fever is based on the virulence of the virus. 50 to 90% fatality rate among those infected. However, the virus itself is not transmitted easily by casual contact. The most worrisome infectious agents are those that are both very contagious and virulent. Next slide, please. Next slide. The causes of infectious diseases are both cellular living organism and acellular non-living organism. The cellular living organism includes fungi and bacteria and parasites. The parasites could either be helminths, the worm, or protozoans, such as Plasmodium that causes malaria. Then we also have virus and prions, which are non-living things that are also capable of causing infectious diseases. And prions are an abnormal pathogenic agent that are transmissible and are able to induce abnormal folding of specific normal cellular protein called prion proteins that are found mostly in the brain. The abnormal folding of the prion protein leads to brain damage. Prion diseases are usually rapidly progressive and always fatal. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, talking about transmission of infectious diseases, it could either be directly or indirectly. If it is directly, it could be from person to person, which we call anthropognosis, or from animal to person, which is zoonosis. If it is direct, an example of direct transmission is person-to-person contact. And it can occur through skin-to-skin contact, kissing, sexual intercourse. Transmission occurs when an infected person touches or exchanges body fluid with someone else. This can happen when an infected person is aware of the illness or not aware. Sexually transmitted diseases can be transmitted this way. Pregnant women can also transmit infectious diseases to their unborn children via the placenta. Some sexually transmitted diseases, such as gonorrhea, can be passed from mother to baby during childbirth. Another direct transmission is droplet spread. This refers to spray within relatively large, sprays that are relatively large within a short range. And they are produced by sneezing, coughing, or even talking. The spray of droplets during coughing and sneezing or talking can spread infectious diseases. Since droplets fall to the ground within a few feet, this type of transmission requires close proximity with the infected individual before transmission can occur. Another form of direct transmission is animal to person contact. This is zoonotic, and this occurs when an infected animal bites. For instance, a rabid dog bites a person, can transmit a disease. Or when we touch the waste of some animal that have been infected, as in touching the waste of cats, for instance, that have been infected with Toxoplasma gondii. We can also contact some infectious diseases that way. Other forms of transmission is by indirect means, and this could be one by airborne transmission. Some infectious agents can travel long distance and remain suspended in the air for an extended period, and they can be carried by wind and air currents. You can catch a disease like measles by entering a room after someone with measles has departed from that room. Another is by contaminated objects. Many germs can linger on an inanimate object such as a tabletop, doorknob, or faucet handle for a short time. If you touch an object such as a doorknob, soon after an infected person has touched it, you might be exposed to infection. Transmission occurs when you touch your mouth, your nose, or eyes before thoroughly washing your hands. One of the reasons hand washing is so important is to prevent diseases. Germs can also be spread through contaminated blood products during blood transmission, dirty clothes and linens, utensils, and medical supplies such as unsterilized hospital equipment. We can also have indirect transmission through contaminated food and drinking water. Another way of transmission by the indirect means is by insect bites. One example we are very, very familiar with is malaria. That's a vector. In this case, mosquito bites an infected person, then bites an uninfected person and transmits that way. It can also be from the environment, the environmental reservoir. For instance, hookworm can be transmitted through touching contaminated soil. And there are several other ways in which transmission can occur. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide. We cannot talk about infectious disease without talking about COVID-19, which is the most topical issue of discussion today. COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by the most recently discovered coronavirus, also known as SARS-CoV-2. The new coronavirus is spread from one person to another, primarily through respiratory droplets generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes. Symptoms will include fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Next slide. Thank you. Anything that affects nature can also affect infectious diseases. So this takes us to how nature has been affected to effect the emergence of infectious diseases. Climate change is one of the topical issues we talk about today when we're talking about nature. And climate change refers to long-term shifts in weather conditions and patterns of extreme weather events. Climate-sensitive vector-borne diseases are likely to be emerging due to climate changes and environmental changes. The advance of human civilization has brought people, plants, and animals and microbes together in and otherwise improbable combinations and locations. So given the potential for such circumstances to introduce vector-borne pathogens to immunologically naive hosts and vectors, it should not be surprising that initial human occupation of remote ecosystem has resulted in vector-borne diseases emergence. So with climate change, we are now seeing that things that were put apart before, pathogens, hosts, and vectors that were in different places before are now continuously coming together, and this can lead to emergence of new infectious diseases. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what is the impact of climate change on human infectious diseases? These changes may impact the survival, reproduction, or distribution of disease pathogens and hosts, as well as the availability and means of their transmission and environment. These climate variables are temperature, precipitation, which affects rainfall, wind, and sunshine. For example, and they affect the pathogen, the hosts or vectors, and also the means of transmission. For instance, excessive heat can lead to the reduction in the incubation period of certain pathogens. And when the incubation period of a pathogen is reduced, it then means that the infectivity increases. It can infect more people or more hosts at a shorter time. So these are some of the ways that climate change can affect human infectious diseases. Also, changes in precipitation can affect accumulation of fecal microorganisms, which can lead to emergence of new enteric diseases. Next slide, please. Next slide. This year's theme for biodiversity or biological diversity is very germane. Hello, you missed some slides. Can you go back, please?
Okay.
Yes, good. This year's theme for biodiversity is very, very germane. Every year, the United Nations decides the theme for International Day for Biological Diversity, which focuses on the issue of biodiversity. This year's theme, Our Solution Are in Nature, highlights the hope, unity, and importance of working together in harmony with nature at all the levels to create a future of life. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Biodiversity and human health are intimately linked to each other. Human beings are an integral and inseparable part of the natural ecosystem, as human health depends ultimately on the health of its species. It is well known that the degradation of ecosystem can have serious impact on human health. So also the restoration of ecosystem can also have serious positive impact on human health. Our natural environment and green space provide ecosystem services that enhances human health and well-being. They improve mental health, they mitigate allergies, and reduce all-cause respiratory cardiovascular diseases, as well as cancer mortalities. The presence, accessibility, proximity, and greenness of green spaces determine the magnitude of their positive health effects. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. People depend on biodiversity in their daily lives in ways that are not always apparent or appreciated. Human health ultimately depends upon ecosystem products and services, such as fresh air, fresh water, food, and fuel sources, which are requisite for good human health and productive livelihood. We've seen and we are experiencing decline in our pollinators. And these declines are of direct concern to human health. They also, because pollinators are directly responsible for about 40% of the global supply of certain nutrients, including vitamin A, folic acid, which we as humans cannot synthesize, which we must get from our food. And they are produced essentially by our pollinators. So pollinator loss could therefore not only reduce the energy intake, but also threaten our health. So it is very, very essential that we restore our pollinators, which we are losing gradually. Thank you. Next slide, please. One of the ways that nature also can cure infectious disease is by the use of natural products from our biodiversity. People depend on biodiversity in their daily lives in ways that are not always apparent. And one of such is from the natural products we get from our biodiversity. These natural products can be an entire organism. Example, a plant, a whole animal, or microorganism. It can also be a part of an organism, for example, leaves of a plant, flowers of a plant, or an isolated animal organ. It can be an extract of an organism, such as the exudate of an organism, or pure compound isolated from an organism, such as alkaloids, flavonoids, steroids, and terpenoids. In simplest terms, natural products are small pharmacologically or biologically active chemical substances that are produced by a biological source. The use of natural products as medicine has been described throughout history in the form of traditional medicine, remedies, potions, and oils. According to the WHO, about 65% of the world's population and about 80% in the case of Africa relies on plant-derived traditional medicine for their primary health care. We have seen that medical needs continues to grow despite the development of new drugs, which unfortunately are mostly derivatives of older classes of drugs that are already in use, and therefore prone to the existing bacterial resistance mechanism. So if a drug is based on an older drug, the resistance patterns that have been developed may also affect this new drug. So it is very, very important that we develop new classes of drugs, and this is an urgent issue. And the solution to this is actually in nature. Natural products, as at the moment, serves about 50% of the source or inspiration of our current pharmacopoeia. And a good percentage of drugs currently in use are derived from microbial species, medicinal plants, and increasingly the marine sources. So the marine environment is now frequently recognized as the largest potential source of biodiversity, and it is being increasingly searched for novel chemicals with useful bioactivity. And we believe very, very firmly that from this natural environment, we'll be able to develop new and novel classes of drugs that the current mechanisms of resistance cannot affect. Next slide, please. Next slide. Is there a link between nature and healthy living in achieving the SDGs? According to Dr. Maria Neira, who is the WHO Director for Public Health and Environmental and Social Determinants of Health, she said the true cause of climate change is felt in our hospitals and in our lungs. The health burden of polluting energy sources is now so high that moving to cleaner and more sustainable choices for energy supply, transport, and food system effectively pays for itself. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Health, well-being, and sustainable development are considered to be intrinsically connected, with health regarded as a precondition indicator, as well as an outcome of successful, sustainable development. That is why we must promote health through all the 17 global goals with innovation and commitment. Health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Next slide, please. Next slide. In concluding, I want to talk about who I describe as my hero for today.
We can't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm talking about my hero for today's International Day of Biological Diversity is Sylvia Goldshore. She was born in 1911. She contracted COVID-19 recently, and we know that older people are the most vulnerable to COVID-19, and the prognosis is not usually very, very good. But she has just beaten COVID-19 at the age of 108 years old. She lived through the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918 and 1919. She also lived through the 2 world wars. She lived through the Great American Depression, and now she has beaten COVID-19. She is my hero for today. Next slide, please. Next slide. I want to thank each and every one of us for listening and for participating in today's International Day for Biological Diversity 2020, organized by Biodiversity Education and Research Center. I want to thank each and every one of you. You can reach us on our website on the screen. The email address is also there. And you can also reach us on social media. We're very, very active on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Telephone numbers for reaching us is also displayed. Thank you. God bless you.
Questions, please. Okay, yes, there's a question from Mohammed. Yeah. Yeah, Mohammed, you're on mute. Hello? Yeah, Mohammed, can you hear me? Hello, Mohammed? Do we have questions? Okay. Okay. Yeah, Kadri, do you have questions? Isaac? Kadri, do you have questions? You have a question?
Yes, I have a question for Mrs. Ibironke.
Okay, go ahead.
On the
go ahead.
Small grant. Yes, I want to ask, do they have a dedicated website for applying for such small grants? And also, what are the requirements? Is it that individuals must apply in person, or is it a collaborative project that they give that small grant for?
Okay, thank you very much. Just hold on, let's take another question. Take a question from Mr. Muyiwa. Are you? Can you? Yeah, Mr. Muyiwa, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, can you hear us, Mr. Muyiwa, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Can
okay,
you hear me?
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir, for putting this together.
Thank you.
And listening to Professor Dixon, I think my knowledge of how nature supports humanity has been deepened. The question I actually have for Prof is that why is it that there is so much resistance against herbal remedies for the coronavirus? Why is it that there is so much opposition to herbal medicine as a potential cure for the coronavirus pandemic? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muyiwa. Yeah, Mrs. Ibironke, are you there? Hello, MC, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yes, you have a question. The question is, I'm sure you must have heard it. The person wants to find out how he or she can register, can submit a concept for a project at a small grant, and if you have a website for that, or how does the person go about it generally?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
All right, good. Thank you for the question. And honestly, let me also thank Professor Dixon, as we were said. Honestly, it was really, really rich presentation. Thank you so much for the information you passed across. It was really beneficial.
Thank you very much.
Okay, for the question, well, of course, I'm sure Dr. Andrew will give even more than enough information about that question, but all the same, we have a dedicated website, we have a global website, and we have a national website, and also we are also linked to the UNDP website. So either of these two, of these three, you can find out. The only thing I will say is that if you go to the Nigerian website now, we are trying to do an update. It will tell you coming soon. So in maybe a few days or few weeks, we should get it up and running. But if you go to the global website, sgp.undp.org, and then if you want to find out about entire global program, it is there. If you want to find out only about Nigeria, just type Nigeria on the search box, and then you will hear so much. You will see, you will be able to get so much information. About eligibility, we only work with NGOs and CBOs. Currently, we don't give funds to individuals, and we don't give funds to government institutions, but communities and NGOs, yes, we work with them. Currently, we have over 120 NGOs that are our grantees. So that is just the simple, but of course, some other things is just that you should have done some things in the environment, at least in the last 3 years, to prove that you are in tune with what we're talking about when it comes to environmental issues and projects. Yeah, so I think that is just it. I have answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, NC. We will put up the website on the chat room and in our email, which we have a general email for everybody. So we'll put up information regarding that. So my colleague Dixon, can you answer that question we were raised? Why is it that there's so much resistance to herbal remedies for COVID-19? Is there any political undertone, or is just our naivety? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's so much resistance, and several factors can be adduced for this. One, I wouldn't want to touch the political angle. We know that for every disease, there's politics around each disease, and there's business around each disease. I wouldn't want to go into that now. But another thing that is very, very important is for the herbal remedies, there is also need for validation. The fact that you claim that something can treat something does not mean it can actually treat it. Usually for any drug to come to the market, certain things must have been put in place. And one of the most essential things is safety of the drug. Now for normal drug discovery, you go from plants, for instance, you go from extraction of the plant, you get pure compounds, then you do target discovery, do target validation, lead identification, lead optimization. Then once you have gotten this and everything is in order, you say that you now have a candidate drug. After you have gotten the candidate drug, the next thing to do is safety test. You are supposed to do several forms of safety tests, from in vitro then to in vivo, and you use different classes of animals. It is when you have done enough safety tests and you can see that such things are safe for human consumption at the particular dosage regimen, then you can now go on to now do clinical trials. And after clinical trials, before a drug can come to the market, if it passes all the indicators that are supposed to be passed. Now, for a lot of these claims, some of these things have not been done. And what the world at large is saying is that we cannot lower the standard because we have a pandemic. A standard is in place. There is a way we must go through before we can get a drug and ascertain that a drug is working and is safe for human consumption. We cannot lower that standard because we have a pandemic now. What can be done is to shorten or remove all the bureaucratic processes that actually affect and keeps this testing long. So, but those standards cannot be lowered. And again, it is actually erroneous to think that because something is natural, it cannot be harmful. A lot of things are natural and could be harmful. So the aspect of safety is very, very key. And it is when this has been addressed before we can take these herbal remedies. But then it doesn't mean that these herbal remedies are not safe. It doesn't mean that they don't have potentials for treating them, but it's just that there are certain standards that should be met, which have not been met. This is one of the reasons why there is this resistance. The others are political and business. For instance, hydroxychloroquine is no longer under any patent. So nobody will benefit, no big pharma will benefit from it if it's now used for any treatment worldwide. But if we develop new drug that has patents, then some people will benefit from it. That's the business angle. And there's also the politics of where cure should come from and things like that. But I wouldn't want to go into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleague, my colleague, for that question. We have a question from the chat box for you. The question says, how can, you have emphasized on the use of, what is your opinion about the attitude of Africa and the world to the Madagascar cure for COVID-19? Like a follow-up to what you have been saying.
I think I have answered that in my last response.
Okay.
We are expecting Madagascar, for instance, to tell us what they used and how they used it. But that is a patent issue, and it will be stupid of them to divulge it. But the other thing that is being asked of Madagascar is to show proof that it is safe. That I don't think they have been able to do. So if Madagascar can actually show proof that it is safe for consumption, I think it's something we should all warm up to. And I must also state here clearly that we have claims here in Nigeria that has credence that we must also look at, and not just the Madagascar. The reason why the Madagascar thing has blown up is because the government of Madagascar has given a lot of credence to what they have discovered, but our government have not done so for the claims we have here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a hand up, Abdul Jilini. So you could just, let me see if I can unmute you. Yes, can you hear me? Abdul Jilini, can you unmute yourself? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, the NC, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Your question, please, Abdul Jalil.
Yes, I want to really congratulate the organizer of this program. It's a wonderful one, even though I joined late, but the little presentation I met with Dr. is very educative and very encouraging. I want to thank him and the organizer of this. But my little comment is that most of the time when you try to go to their website, it's difficult to get, or their Twitter, you hardly get any quick response before this program. But later on, I think it was a little bit better yesterday. I was able to get my, the password and the rest. So that's just the little thing I want to contribute. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Abdul. Sorry for if you did not get a response on time. We had over 200 participants, so we needed to attend to everybody, and we did. Thank you so much. Yeah, the NC, you have a question. I see your hands are up.
Thank you very much. It's really not a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, but it's a follow-up comment to what Professor Dixon said about, a follow-up question to what Muiwa said about not accepting traditional methods or whatever, nature cure.
Yes.
I think I am also of the opinion that of course, it may be either by default or by design that the scientific community, not because just as he said, after explaining and explaining, there is still this side of political and business side of any issue. And so I think it is, it should be one of our resolve to find out how the scientists can make more impact on both the business and the political world, such that, because I always believe, even the business world, for example, if you let them see the positive side of, or the business side of whatever we are presenting, of course, I still know that, okay, the other one he said is about where the drug is coming from, which is also a very valid point. But I think the scientists will need to do so much more to ensure that the people who need to get the information, they get it. How we will do that should be a collective responsibility of all of us to put our heads together so that we can get our message and our information across to the people that matter. I've come across and I know of a few cases where people say, oh, you're doing this, oh, you have done this, oh, we didn't know about it. And I think so. I just want all of us to put our thinking caps on and begin to think how else or how more effective can we get our information across to the people that matter and who will take decision about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, NC. As a matter of fact, one of our statements today we put out on Twitter that for biodiversity conservation to be heard is that we must have effective and simple means of communicating biodiversity. We must communicate biodiversity or what we have said in very simple terms that everybody can actually understand what biodiversity is all about. Yes, I have somebody has his hand up. Where is he? Let me see. Yes, Abubakar Badamasi, you have your hand up. Can you hear me, Abubakar?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, please, your question.
Yeah, thanks to the organizers for organizing this wonderful presentation. The question, the question goes to you, the host, or maybe Professor Dixon.
Okay.
Can we have his presentation in PDF format?
Okay, I can answer that. What we plan to, we are recording this program now. What we plan to do, we are going to put it up on YouTube, and we'll share links to this presentation. In fact, the whole conversation as your teaser is being recorded and it will be uploaded on YouTube. So as the days goes by, we will share the contact on YouTube so you could have it. Then we are also going to put up a Twitter thread about the presentation, page by page with some very important salient points on each slide. So you can also check out our Twitter page to check out the slides and the salient points. So yes, you will have all the information regarding today's presentation. Yeah. Thank you very much. And so let me go back. Let me go to the chat box. If we have a question, let's see. Oh, okay. I have one question here, but well, let me see. Now the question is, it's what can you advise the government concerning striking researchers, lecturers that would have contributed immensely to providing some herbal remedies for the pandemic through their research?
Is that a question for me?
Of course.
Okay. I have to make it clear here that when lecturers are on strike, it doesn't mean that they are striking. The strike includes not carrying out research. All lecturers that are on strike should still be carrying out research now on their individual basis or in their lab. Nothing stops them from carrying out research. But again, the advice I'll give to government is just that government should honor their agreement. The reason why lecturers are on strike is because government has notoriously refused to honor their agreement over the years. These agreements were made between staff, academic staff of Nigerian universities and government. Government promised to honor them and have refused to honor them. That is why that's why lecturers keep going on and on with strike. After one has ended, another one comes up again. So if government can honor their agreement, all this will be a thing of the past. And I also want to quickly touch on what the NC said earlier. It is also one way we can solve this problem so that we can have international credibility when we are talking is to improve our research infrastructure.
Absolutely.
We have very, very poor research infrastructure that we cannot actually work and develop drugs in Africa and in Nigeria especially. You can hardly find preparative HPLC, GCNMR, LCNMR in most of our labs, in most of the top universities in Nigeria or in research centers. So as these things are absent, we cannot do effective research. So most of the time, before we get good results, we still have to go abroad, do this research there, as we are doing this research over there, we are losing knowledge to them because you can't do anything in their lab and hide it from them. So they get this knowledge, they work fast with it and come out with results. But if we have well-equipped labs here, we'll be able to come out with good results. If you remember, NIPRID came out with niprisan for management of sickle cell anemia. And it was a very, very wonderful drug that came out from NIPRID. That is some of the things we can do. And it is well accepted. People are using it for the management of sickle cell. So we can do all those things, but we need well-equipped labs and good infrastructure for us to come out with these things that the international community can recognize. And I can also tell you that most of the big pharma companies have stopped doing research on natural products, especially from plants. But they will sponsor small startup companies that are very, very serious in places where this biodiversity is rich. So this is an opportunity for our young researchers to begin to think of starting up such startup companies where they can do research on developing drugs from natural products. And if they come out with good results, all these big pharma companies are usually ready to sponsor them so that they can get the lead compound from them after they are through.
Thank you. Thank you, colleague. There's a question on the chat room. With the recent increase in infectious diseases, what can the government do to protect her citizens from future pandemics? Since it is obvious infectious diseases are meant to invade the world at a specific time.
One of the things government can do is what we have discussed here today, to take care of our environment, to take care of nature. Let us restore nature, even though we cannot restore nature back to its pristine form. If we are able to do good work with restoring nature, we can help with the spread of some of this pandemic. If you take the host away from the pathogen or the vector and you separate them, or you take away the means of transmission, then some of these infectious diseases will not spread. So, and these things are happening at a very rapid rate now because of the fact that human beings are beginning to encroach on species that were not there before. And so it's now leading to a mix between humans and pathogens or vectors that we're not coming in contact with. This is one of the things government can do. But again, government should also have a rapid response team that will be in place before even any pandemic should occur. And we are all talking about coronavirus now, but there's something in Nigeria that is killing more people than coronavirus now, Lassa fever. We are not talking about it. It's not being funded, and Lassa is killing a lot of people. So funding is very, very important. Putting the right people in place to manage such things is also very, very important. And at this point, we should also commend NCDC for the good work they are doing. Even though they are overwhelmed, they are trying, and we should commend them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon, for that. Do we still have other questions? Do we have questions? Okay, yes, there's a question here. It says, can coronavirus be transmitted through air we breathe?
There is a lot of controversy with coronavirus being airborne or not being airborne. But one thing we are very, very sure about is that it can be transmitted through droplets. Now, these droplets, if you are close in proximity to the person, to a carrier of coronavirus, and the person releases the droplets, of course, it comes through the air to you, and you can catch it. But the science on the transmissibility through airborne means, when you are not in close proximity to the person, is still debatable. So I wouldn't want to give a conclusive statement of that.
Okay, Thank you. Aliu Mohammed, you have a question. I see your hands are up.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Or rather, sorry, good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
First and foremost, I would like to appreciate the BERC for putting up something as beautiful as this. I think I will encourage you guys to do more of this more often, because it's like it's creating a platform for us, even the younger ones, you understand, to interact with the well-learned colleagues like you. At least we could tap from your knowledge. And our advice, if such webinars will be organized more often on recent issues happening, so we could come online, share ideas, get it, breaking barriers between distance and the likes of them. Then secondly, again, I don't know, I will, like my colleague just asked earlier on, that is Anibab Kadri. He said, how can we access grants? I think if the process for getting these grants could be made a little bit much more easier, because like for instance now in Kano where I'm based, with the recent happening of this corona, they were saying people are dying from corona in Kano. Yes, people were dying, but other things also contributed. You see, like the case of meningitis, there are no trees as in the rate at which they cut down trees in Kano are just so rapid. You see, during the heat period, the environment will be so hot that at times you'll be like wondering, what's happening? Is the world coming to an end or what? So I think if we could get it, be doing more campaigns, get it convincing the community that it is good for them to go green. Let them try to be cultivating more trees. Let's plant more trees in our environment. Let's even let the government involve and say, okay, government, why can't we just encourage the community to plant more trees? Maybe if a person should have a tree in his house and nurture that tree for like 3 years, the government will give you some incentive. Let's encourage them so that at least these measures could help reduce all these high temperatures that we experience everywhere. So, and I think that would be all for now, and most I would like to thank the prof for sharing such knowledge with us. Because I gained a lot from this webinar. So just speaking.
Thank you, Aliu, for your comment. And I want to tell you that Aliu, that you have raised a gap in your community. And since you have found out that there's a gap in your community with regards to a less number of trees, you can start up a small community advocacy for tree planting. It doesn't necessarily have to be a massive statewide campaign. If only in your community, for example, you live in Tuduwada, or even in a street in Tuduwada, that you make sure that every house in that street within Tuduwada has planted at least one tree. That will go a long way in in bridging the gap of the advocacy of less trees. Yeah, you have a question, Dixon, on the chat room from Muyiwa again. He said, can you shed more light on the potentials to create business and job around plant research through investments in startups?
Thank you very much. The world is talking about one small biotech company now that might take over the world very soon. It's called Moderna, that are doing clinical trial for their vaccines for COVID-19. It's a small startup company, and the world has recognized them now. So also, we have a very, very rich and diverse biodiversity in Nigeria, spanning from our mangrove swamp to the arid drylands in the north. And this can be a basis for establishing a business. Once you have the requisite knowledge in medicinal chemistry, pharmacognosy, and a little pharmacology, you can actually establish a business around this. And the business is that the starting point could be plants that are used for the treatment of certain ailments in your community. You take a look at them and try to identify the active principle in those plants or microorganisms or animals that are used. And if you're able to identify it, you can sell such knowledge to big pharmaceutical companies, and they are ready to pay for it. That is one way of going about it. If you are able to patent it, You can also go the whole hog of developing a new drug. And if you have started a new pharmaceutical company that way. But a lot of startups are more interested in developing what they call lead candidates and selling to the big pharmaceutical industry. It's cheaper that way, and it's cheaper to run that way if you just focus on lead identification and you sell, you go on to another one, you sell. So businesses can be built around this, and it's something that young researchers should look at to develop.
Can you throw more light on the lead representatives? Give an example.
A lead candidate.
A lead candidate, yes.
A lead candidate, once you have identified a pure compound, for instance, from a plant, for instance, that is responsible for the biological activity that plant carries out. The lead, excuse me. Now, if you are able to develop, you are able to isolate such pure compounds, and you carry out specific tests for its safety, for what we call the ADMET studies, you carry out ADMET studies, and you discover that, one, it is capable of treating an ailment, or it has a mechanism of action which can stop the progression of certain disease. Two, you have been able to identify the target for that compound in a disease setting, and you validate it. Then you have developed what we call a lead candidate. Even though it treats the disease, you cannot call it a drug at that time. It is when it has gone through what we call drug development, then pass all the regulatory agencies test, that you can call it a drug. But before it passes all through those, we call it a lead candidate, even though that is what will be the eventual drug at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. There's a question on the chat room. With the rapid increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in Nigeria, we are afraid of going into collaborative research with foreign researchers because it seems the data is somehow political and one wouldn't want to give out a false result. Please, can you advise, and how best can we assess some of the serum samples of tested people? Yeah.
If we want to assess serum sample of tested people, the only way we can get it is through NCDC. But I can also assure you that even within us here in Nigeria, we don't share information amongst ourselves, state to state. I'm saying this from a privileged information, that even sharing of information among states in Nigeria is not done the way it should be done. And I think it is high time we stop this, share knowledge on what we are doing to arrest this pandemic so that we can deal with it as a community and deal with it effectively. But to assess samples, the only people that know who was actually tested and what the result looks like is NCDC. And that's the only people you can go to get samples. We are also, maybe I can also announce here that my university is pioneering a research on seroprevalence of coronavirus in Nigeria. I think we are going to start with Niger State as a case study. And the research is ongoing. The university management is supporting the research, and even Niger State government, through the Commissioner of Health, is also supporting the research. And very soon, we might have some useful information to share on seroprevalence data of coronavirus in Nigeria.
Thank you. There's another question on the chat room. With so many confusion regarding the source of COVID-19, my concern goes to the wildlife sources. What can we gain in Nigeria regarding indiscriminate poaching and wildlife consumption?
This is a very delicate question. Delicate in the sense that consumption of bushmeat has been part of our dietary menu for a very, very long time. So to tell people to just stop consumption of bushmeat without giving an alternative might not work immediately. But if we encourage people to go into farming of what we consume from the wild, like grass cutter farming and such, then we will now have a pool where we'll get this same product we consume without necessarily going back to the wildlife. And if we are farming these things ourselves, we'll be able to control the environment. And so the issue of a zoonotic jump from wildlife to man will be restricted. So it is very, very necessary that we stop poaching. We are losing a lot of our wildlife. Some of them are going into extinction. And it is necessary for us to stop poaching, but also we should also encourage farming of some of these things that our people eat from the wildlife.
Thank you. The last question from the chat box, then we'll go to the Madam NC raising her hand. The question on chat board, the last question will be, what are scientists or researchers doing about the spread of fake news concerning this pandemic in the science and in science generally? I think scientists that know better are not in the front line of communication and passing correct information. I have observed that people who do not know much about science and the pandemic are doing more of the talking, especially on the social media space.
It is necessary that we do not allow this to continue. The social media space is for all of us, and when we see some of this fake news, it is good we refute it with a scientific basis. I've had to do a lot of that in recent time, especially, and you know, some of these things spread more by WhatsApp. And when you see such things, it's usually good you respond to them scientifically and help to stop the spread of such fake news.
Okay, thank you. Then the last but not the least, hands up. Madam NC, your hands are up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, I just want to, I think it was Aliyu that asked how to make it easier to access grants. Yeah. And of course you answered, but I just want to add a few comments to it. And I just done a little thing, few points. You see, one of the issues with NGOs in Nigeria and CBOs is because many go into it for the wrong reasons. And it is also, and what I always say is that it is not bad, so much bad that you go into it for the wrong reasons. But when you get into it, are you interested in making any impact? And this comes to the points like, what is your passion to make a difference? Yeah. And what is the seriousness to make that impact? What do you have? Do you just want to get the grant to be seen to be doing something, or you have a particular objective that you want to achieve? Then do you understand the issues? Many people, what we have found from my experience is that many people, they just have a glimpse of the problems. But for them to really sit down and analyze what these problems are, it's an issue. Well, whether by design or by default, that is one thing. Then efforts that or the organization has made in the past. In as much as I said that eligibility is about you must have experience in environment and you must have been practicing for 3 years, there is a way an individual who has a track record of working in the environment but doesn't have an NGO can approach us if he or she has identified a very genuine challenge or problem that he or she thinks they can handle. There is a way we could go about it and then see how we can work together. And then, of course, integrity and accountability of the either of the NGO in this case, because we deal with NGO and CBOs, is very important. And then, of course, many of our NGOs, even the ones we have supported, the challenge we also have with them is that they don't think in a sustainable manner when they are implementing their project. They just feel, oh, we got this grant for this person from this organization and we are going to implement for 1 year or for 2 years. After 2 years, what happens? Are you going to go cap in hand and be looking for fund again? Or you are thinking sustainably? See, these days, if in as much as we say NGOs and CBOs are not for profit, I tell you they are for profit. It's just that the profit is not going to your pocket, to you as individual, as naira and kobo. But it's going to the communities. It's going to, it becomes, you can turn your, whatever your idea is, you can turn it to a social enterprise. And by that, it's sustainable. You are making impact. You are not making money per se into your pocket, but you are helping community and you are making impact as much as possible. So these are some of the things. There are a few of the NGOs that we have worked with who are so serious that we are even supporting them to the extent of getting NAFDAC registration for some of their products. So it is not so, it is not so much that it is so difficult, but there are people who just submit proposal just for the fun of submitting proposal. Oh, there is money here. Let's just put up something and just submit it. And when you will see it and will see that there is no merit in it, of course, it is difficult for us to go ahead with that. Thank you very much.